Hi, everyone. I'm Angel Borrelli. Welcome to Season 7, Episode 2 of The FIX. And I just want to tell everyone, I'm so sorry that this podcast had a 2-week delay in its recording. I'm here in California in the Bay Area, and as most of you know, the fires out here have taken over everything. The lighting, the air, between the breathing problems and not being able to speak without coughing, it's just been a nightmare. But finally, we're through it, and the air is getting better every day. And I cannot tell you how happy I am to be back and to be recording this episode. So we have a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about today. We're going to be talking about MLB pitching injuries. We're going to be talking about what I love to talk about in September, creating and planning your cycles of training between now and the beginning of the 2021 season. We're also going to discuss some of the special recruitment obstacles facing our graduating high school seniors. And finally, in my Engineering the Pitching segment, I will be discussing the part of the pitching motion that is my current obsession. So let's get to the top of the first with Coach Larry Owens of Bellarmine University. Hey, Larry, welcome back.
Hey, Angel. Thanks for having me back. It's
Great.
Good to be back, and
yes.
glad you're feeling better.
Oh, yes, it's been awful. So anyway, thank you so much for being flexible with the recording date. So am I imagining it, Larry, or are there a lot of pitching injuries that aren't just happening now, that seem to happen like on day one when the season started?
Yeah, they've picked up quite a bit, and I don't know. I mean, we don't have a season like this to compare. You know, we haven't played a short season like this, so I don't know if it's just due to the short season and guys not being ready to pitch, or if it's something that they're doing differently, or it's something in particular that they're doing. But through the end of last week, if I'm counting right, I had 93, just pitchers only, 93 injuries where guys either lost the season or lost time. And 54 of those 93 are out for the season. And they are elbow injuries, shoulder injuries, forearm injuries, and some bicep and tricep injuries. Some were out for the season. Some were out. I had 14 out indefinitely. And then others were scheduled to come back late in September or relatively soon. And some obviously lost some time earlier in the season. And maybe they're back and healthy, hopefully. But it just seems like, and listening to other people talk about it in the industry, it seems like there's a lot of injuries, and I certainly don't know the cause, and thought it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on it.
Yes, in fact, I heard an interesting statistic last week, which is 35% of the staff, the entire team of every major league team is on the IL.
Sheesh.
I know. So it's not just pitchers, but we did a podcast right when the pandemic started, and I had Ed Sprague on, and I had Andy Tarpley on. You were on, and we were and I was mentioning, I'm concerned, and it's why I followed it up with a podcast of how to stay prepared. I'm concerned about injuries, and so when I saw in the first week pitchers that we consider sturdy, like Verlander, going down with an injury, and then they started to continue, I said to myself, wow, something has gone wrong here, because it does feel and seem like it's more prevalent than in any other season. And you mentioned the elbow. Did you give those injuries in order? So the elbow's first, forearm is second?
Yeah, actually there were 45 elbow injuries, 27 shoulders, 16 forearms, 4 bicep, 1 tricep. And out of that number, 54 were done for the season and 14 are out indefinitely.
Yeah. So the thing is, and I love this because it's going to tie into my teaching moment where I talk about the importance of preparation for the upcoming season. You can't rush that. So the thoughts that I had, I have a thought that's just probably just normal that most people think, which is they possibly were not prepared. I think a lot of pitchers didn't think the season was going to start. And I'm not sure every pitcher stayed in shape. I know with my pitchers, and including my minor leaguers, they have stayed in shape. They're in great shape. We had to be prepared because we couldn't take the risk in that, the season would start. And even my high school and college guys didn't know what was going to be happening in the summer. So we stayed on top of it. Wasn't easy. but we had to grind to get it done, given that fields were closed, gyms were closed. But I feel like a lot of them didn't know, and they may not have known if they were going to take the option to play or not. So I absolutely feel that there may have been a lack of preparation, but I also think there is some other thing that is in play here. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say this, and then I want your thoughts on what I'm saying. So I have been concerned actually when 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I don't even remember when we started talking about it, when the data for pitching started taking over. First, it was data. Then it was really getting computerized data. Then it was getting computers installed and cameras installed. And then it was taking that data to make decisions, strategy decisions that go so deep into analytics that pitchers were being pulled with certain pitch counts, regardless of whether the eye data, what you as a coach would see as a reason to pull some pitcher, maybe wasn't occurring. But I felt that when it started going into that detailed of an analysis that was affecting parts of the game, I started thinking to myself, if I'm right, this is going to blow up. This is going to blow up in the face of the pitchers and the coaches, because coming from a background where, in graduate school, all you do is read statistics. And the more you are involved with statistics, the more you know how to actually use them in a very small way. But you also know how easy it is to lose the forest for the trees, or the trees for the forest. Which way does it go? The trees. I can't even remember right now, but how easy it is to lose sight of what's really going on. And so let me tell you how I came up with this. So I was watching football very carefully on Sunday, and I'm a Raiders fan, and I was watching the quarterbacks. And of course, we know that there's a million plays, and these guys have to memorize all of them. And I said to myself, you can't put a quarterback on too short of a leash, because he's got the play, but he also has to read what's going on. And in the last second, he may have to do something completely differently. And I thought, it must be interesting coaching a quarterback, because if you overcoach him, he's going to lose his instincts. You can't harness his instincts. You can't harness what makes him great. And if you cut him loose, that's why the quarterbacks that came into the NFL that look like college quarterbacks, you know how live the college games look sometimes compared to the NFL. You're like, God, that guy's really great. He's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
What you're seeing are the instincts of kids, like playing the game, having fun playing it, but you don't get the sense they're on a short leash. I think pitchers are on a short leash right now. I think that somewhere, I've been working with pitchers one-on-one since 1995. I'm inside their head. When you work with only pitchers and you work with one at a time, and now it's 25 years of experience, there's so much that goes on in their head, and it's a beautiful thing. And I don't see pitchers shaking off the catcher the way I used to. And I used to think, when I first started studying pitching and watching it, I used to think that was the coolest part of the game, watching a pitcher shake off the catcher. I love that. And we know that sometimes they do it just, they're not really shaking them off. They're just, the wiggle finger thing. So, I'm like, I feel like pitchers are on a short leash. So it's fighting with their instincts. It's fighting with their ability, because let me tell you something. I have always been a fan of let a pitcher go as deep as he can go in a game. And if your eye data as the coach says he still looks good, because when a pitcher starts to break down, leave him out there, but give him the proper recovery. And I still believe recovery is the issue, not pull him at 75 because the data says so. But I think that and plus what must be happening to the pitchers, which is that they start to have to rise up to the level of the data. So now you hear pitchers talking about, I want to improve my spin rate. Well, spin rate's a product of velocity, or a pitching motion or using your hand and fingers correctly. So you have to, if you're trying to accomplish something at the end of the motion, in other words, let's say trying to overuse your fingers, your wrist, whatever, if your brain is telling you, I've got to do something with my spin rate, and you put it on that kind of a detail as opposed to what produces a good pitch, which gives you whatever spin rate it gives you. Okay, because we saw a guy the other day. Didn't someone throw a no-no and the highest velocity he had was a 91 miles per hour?
Yeah, I don't know about the velo, but yeah.
Yeah, 91 mils for the Cubs.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. And so I think that there is something that's bouncing back onto the pitchers where there's an unnatural thing. So given the short preparation notification, given what the goals of the pitchers are right now, where they're being, in a sense, forced to possibly pitch selections that maybe wouldn't be what they would do, I feel like they're on a short leash. What do you think about that theory?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to it. I also think there's something to, I don't know that I could speak for the starters. The starters are pretty easy. Their schedule's set, but the relievers, I'd be curious to see how many relievers, and I'd like to dive into this injured list a little deeper and see how many of the relievers are getting hurt. Are they getting hurt because they're getting overused because we're relying so much on analytics? Because the book says he's done after the third. The order is going to come around the third time, so he's done. He throws 5 innings. I blow up my bullpen for a stretch of time because I'm overusing them, and then are they getting hurt because they're overused and they don't have the proper time to rest in between times out? I mean, a big league pitcher is going to have to pitch back-to-back days. That's going to have to happen.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have to throw multiple innings back-to-back days sometimes. But you also have to be mindful of his workload. And sometimes I think I'd be curious if a lot of these injuries aren't relievers, and because I wonder how much overuse has to play in. And I'll only think about that because if you look back over the years since 1998, as you move forward, that was the first year for 30 teams. As you move forward, there have been more pitchers that pitch in the big leagues each year. Which means, for me, especially recently, you're talking about, I don't remember the exact number. It's around 500 something guys pitched in the big leagues in 98. And to flash forward to 2019, it was well over 800 or around 800. So it was a significant jump. And I kind of feel it in regards to relievers that we're just using them to use them. All right, you're available. You're going to pitch today. We're playing a video game from the press box, so to speak, or we're playing a video game from the front office, and the book says he's not going to be effective 3 times through. Get the starter out. Let's get a reliever in there, and then you end up blowing your bullpens up. And I think that has something to do with it too. I think there's a lot of things that are contributing to this. Not prepared, pitching to analytics, trying to create, like you're talking about, create things pitch specific where I'm trying to increase the spin rate or whatever the heck they want to increase or improve. Velocity, guys are trying to throw harder. There's a lot of things. I would just be curious to see how these relievers are getting used over the course of time, and are we not giving them the proper time in between pitches, or time in between outings? Time in between outings.
Yes. Well, there's a thought that I had when you were speaking, because when you mentioned this to me some months ago when we were talking about, in fact, you gave a statistic that explained why a pitcher would be pulled second time through the lineup or third time, because they've analyzed his capabilities and they see that, he doesn't perform well. Well, when you take a human athlete who's supposed to perform for you, if he's good at his job, he's supposed to get better every day. I know I'm way better right now than I was 25 years ago. I'm way better right now than I was a week ago because I'm around guys that are so good at what they do. I learn every day when I'm trying to figure out what's going on. My pitchers teach me so much. So when you're working, any of us, we're getting better. We're supposed to get better every day. So a guy has a really bad statistic third time through the lineup. Well, guess what? Next year, you're lucky if you get him twice through the lineup. How do you get better? If you take away the respect of that pitcher, the way the statistics should be used is, hey, look at this. When you start to get into this inning, Fifth inning, you have a problem. Or when you get to this part of the lineup, you have a problem. Let's figure out what's going on there. Let's get on top of that. Let's do some creative thinking. Let's do some training. Let's do some thought process and give that guy his power back to overcome that. Because what's going to happen is when you start making decisions that are binary about should he be in or out, you have no hope for the future. And what you're saying is so awesome. And guess what? The guys that are closers, they're wired a certain way inside their muscles. Their physiology is different. They're not built for coming in as much as they're possibly being used. I think your idea of analyzing or figuring out the proportion of relievers, like who's getting hurt, is an excellent idea. But I also think that we have to really, really start to think about the hole you're digging for these starting pitchers. How disrespectful. See, I'm like the attorney for the defense of the pitchers. I respect a pitcher's brain. I respect pitchers because I know being on that hill, taking over that game. I mean, you know the kind of brain you have to have. You're an ex-pitcher. You understand that. And you're a lefty.
Hey.
So, I mean, hey, we know the extra challenges
Right,
you
yeah.
had,
Oh,
right?
many
You
challenges.
had to really
Many.
overcome them. And actually, you don't show any signs of leftiness very often anymore. But seriously, I think that when you limit, it's like if you're raising a child and you don't give the child ever a chance to be an independent thinker or to take responsibility, what are you going to have? A crazy teenager and a crazy adult and an adult that can't take responsibility. At some point, will go in reverse. And I think that they rely on it so much that they're taking away from the training and the kind of creative process that I know I have to use. If a pitcher comes to me and says, Angel, I don't know what's happening. I'm losing it in the fourth inning. Okay, let's get to work on that. And now we're improving not just the component that's weak, but now you make him a better pitcher overall because this guy's got a job he's got to keep. So I think everything could be going in reverse. And I kind of like when it kind of blows up in people's faces because I'm hoping that it will make them look at some of these things. The other issue that we haven't talked about is we know that with spin rate being so important, even though I don't know why, Larry, I mean, does anybody throw a fastball anymore? But
they throw fewer fastballs
but
than
still,
ever.
the
Right?
velocity, the spin rate, et cetera. And I think that the training methods, when you go and say, okay, I want better spin rate, instead of really looking at, well, guess what? If your shoulder doesn't act right, your hand won't get out there right. And if your hand's not out there right, your wrist isn't going to work right. And guess what? Spin rate is a product of the wrist allowing the fingers to do its job. So the goal is, okay, let's just do this. And all you're doing is looking at the grip and the this and the that. So I think training methods may also be happening. And I've said this before when we've discussed training methods that are designed to, quote unquote, we're increasing your velocity. And they're using tools, external tools to do that. When you subject your arm to that, you have got to think of it as a pitching outing, and you have to recover from that. And if pitchers are using these training methods in season, plus they're not getting enough recovery anyway, then we really can be in trouble. And we do know that a lot of teams have gone down the road of finding ways to fix things externally because we still don't have people on the teams that are actually looking qualitatively at why does he keep hurting his forearm? Why is he hurting his back? Why is his elbow hurting? And then looking to the motion, or why is his fastball not locating? And looking to the body that produces that. So in a sense, I would love it if all of that's happening everyone could sit down and evaluate and maybe take on a different way to look at the problem. Otherwise, we're going to have guys that are being, it's going to be starters 3 innings. And I mean, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad.
And I looked up the numbers while you were talking. In '98, 557 guys pitched in the big leagues. In 2019, 831 guys pitched in the big leagues. So far this year, 710 have pitched in the big leagues.
Wow.
So they're definitely using the roster differently. And I'm just, it's just a theory or a thought. I'd be curious to see how many of these guys or relievers are going on the DL because they're not getting proper rest in between outings. So.
Right. Well, I hope this off season has people rethinking how they're doing things. And also all the injuries that you mentioned, the elbow, the forearm. When you see elbow and forearm injuries, you have to look at mechanics because, yes, you have protective muscles around those joints that are supposed to keep them from being completely injured. And sometimes when the pitcher has tightness, that means that a forearm actually is doing its job. It's giving you a warning that it's wearing out and it's not going to be able to protect the UCL. But the thing is I think in this off season, when the season's over, there has to be some rethinking of how the guys are going to first restore themselves and then how they're going to build and be better prepared for, next year. So anyway, great topic, Larry.
Good stuff.
Yes. So listen, there's been so much chaos in the baseball industry with the seasons and with high school being shut down. And so what I want to talk about next, I get so many calls at this time of the year in September as to how to cycle the training. And with this year, the pandemic having shut baseball down, what started happening was I saw people getting very chaotic and start panicking over what they're going to do. And we have to keep our eye on the ball. And even though we don't know what's going to happen next year, you cannot hypothesize, well, I'm not going to do anything because we don't even know if baseball is happening. You still have to plan. And because baseball is a spring season for, of course, college, youth, and high school pitchers, we still have to plan for the next season, 2022. And the planning starts in September. So September is the month where you have to start thinking about the beginning of the 2022 season. And what you don't want to do is get caught up in the chaos of what's happening now and say, well, we don't know what's happening, so that you're asleep at the wheel. And the second thing you don't want to do is, because of the chaos, start going absolutely crazy at this time of the year, thinking I haven't pitched at all, and then signing up for 100 showcases and finding places that are doing things. And then here you are in January and you haven't really done anything to improve yourself. So there are some critical things to think about right now. And also we have to have solutions for the guys, especially the seniors who were counting on their junior years to be seen, to possibly be recruited. And now they are in a special problem situation, which, Larry, I'm going to bring you in on that when I get done talking about the calendar. So I think the topic we just covered with the MLB injuries, let's assume that there's a proportion of them that come from lack of preparedness. You definitely don't want to have that happen. So let's talk about the pitcher, because there's a few different category of pitchers. Let's talk about the pitchers right now that normally would be shutting down after their summer season. So somewhere in September, most pitchers that are on a summer team are done for the season, and they're going to go into either a fall ball, which is still sort of an off-season time. They're doing off-season training. So that we're thinking about the pitchers, and I have a few that are on this kind of schedule. They played summer ball, so some youth teams played, and then also some high school teams. I have an audience from all over. So out here in California, we're all jammed up. But my guys that are out in the East, they're rocking and rolling. So they're on a normal schedule. So what I want to remind everyone of is, in order to rebuild a pitcher's tissue and restore him, you have to have a certain number of weeks. And what you hope happens in the off season is you can recover the pitcher's tissue, and then you can strengthen him because he has to build a better body. Because if your body gets better, your pitching is going to improve itself all by itself. Now, a lot of you might say, well, my guys haven't been pitching at all. Beautiful. You can skip the restoration part in the sense you can go big right away. Recovering pitchers from an when they begin off season is not that you're not training. It's you're training differently. You're training with different exercises. You're not pushing strength right away. You're kind of just letting them chill for 2 weeks in the gym, letting everything get some blood flow in and recover. If they're not coming off of pitching, then they can go big right away. So if somebody this week, the middle of September, starts their off-season training, then you are going to have a capability of having a good 6 weeks of training before you actually start flat ground. And all of this is with the desire, and this is the way I do it. And Larry, I don't know, what I'm speaking really to high school coaches right now, because you guys have a very organized plan, but high schools don't always have that. So coaches call me. They have more flexibility to do things. But when I work with high school guys, and even with the few youth pitchers I work with, I want all my guys conditioned to 79 pitches on February 1st, which is February is when they start getting together for practices, scrimmages, and the first league games are usually at the end of February or March. I do not want my pitchers turning himself over to the high school coach and expecting them to build their pitch count up for them during those 4 weeks when basically they're going to be facing hitters. So I want my guys prepared, even if when they get to the team, they have to bring the volume down because maybe the coach says, hey, I only want you throwing 30 pitches. I want you in for 1 inning, but I want them covered. And in order to be ready at the end of July or at the end of January, you can be to 79 pitches by the last week of January if you start your off-season program right now. And the off-season program usually takes as many weeks as you can get, and 6 or 7 weeks, because you reverse engineer this. So you start with where you want to be on February 1. And right now, if you start your off-season training right now, this week, you can get 6 solid weeks in before your 7th week is flat ground at 45 feet. The 8th week is flat ground at 60. And because you're controlling, you're not on a team, because you're controlling when they're throwing, you can actually continue training during that time. And you actually then, so you're picking up a ball the end of October, you actually then are throwing your first bullpen on November 8th. And this is a very conservative program. So if you have to start later, if you start on September 8th with 20 to 25 pitches and increase by, 5 pitches each week, you're good to go on February 1. So that is for the pitchers who have the flexibility now to start thinking about the season because they're not throwing. Now, we've got this situation with seniors that I want to jump into who have not been doing anything. And so I'm going to just talk about a senior that I've been working with. So they had to, of course, shut down. So we immediately started planning for what we were going to do. And it was an opportunity for some building initially with training. And then we went into working on the mechanics. Now, because he's a senior and the pressure on them, we started planning a showcase cycle for him because he wasn't able to pitch last year. So he was out of touch with, being recruited. Now, because of the showcases and, Perfect Game has been having them, they've already had some, Head First has had some, and the schools, a lot of them are being canceled, but a lot of them are still happening. Because of that, he's going to actually be pitching through the first week of November. So when you have a senior that's going crazy over showcases, you still have to figure out how do I somehow still following the rule of training, flat ground, then pitching? That's the three things you want to get done. You've got to have a time to train. How do you fit that in when you have somebody who is starting late? He can't shut down until November. And what I want to remind everyone is if you're shutting down for 4 weeks only, you do not have to go through a full flat ground throwing program. You do not have to start at such a minimal volume, but you still have to somewhere try to get that pitcher 4 weeks minimally where he can get into the gym, blow out his carburetors, build his shoulders back up, hit his wrists and forearms really hard in a way that you can't when you're throwing a ball, and make sure that those joints are absolutely critically restored and recovered, and you can get some solid training in 4 weeks. Then when he starts his program, because it can be scheduled, you can still schedule in some training with some very careful thinking. So he doesn't have to completely stop training, but he can alter it in such a way. But you still want to think about getting those cycles done. So the most important thing is having the phases. The least important thing, or the thing that is ideal, is to have a long time in each phase. But when it's not possible, you have to be creative enough to still have those phases. So does that make sense, Larry?
Yes, absolutely, it does. So that kind of, I mean, it kind of puts them on the schedule that a lot of the college guys will be on more than
Yes,
anything, because they're just shutting down later. A lot of their college players are, if they're permitted to right now, are going to begin playing a fall season, so to speak, where they'll play a lot of inter squad games, through in a lot of cases through the month of October. So you're kind of putting them on the same type schedule, actually.
exactly. Yeah. And what we don't want to have happen is, it's very easy to say, well, I haven't been playing baseball, or I haven't been competing, or I haven't been throwing, or I haven't been doing this. What you haven't been doing is already past. You want to take a look at your season and think about, what do I want to do right prior to that season? You've got to look ahead to February or March and say, okay, I want to have my mechanics sound when I start that season. I want to have my pitches all dialed before that season starts. So what do I have to do? Well, I'm going to have to back it up. I want to pitch for at least this many weeks. And okay, I got to work on my pitching motion with some strength skills. I want to think about what part of my motion needs work, and I want to address it in the gym, which is the place that you change the mechanics at first. So if you reverse engineer that way, you don't get caught up in what hasn't been happening, but you get on track and organized for what is going to happen. And I don't care when you start those cycles, as long as you think about the components of it and you follow that, you're going to be great, because everyone now is dying to play baseball. So you're highly motivated. So does that make sense, Larry, to make sure you get those three phases in?
Absolutely. And to be clear, when you say reverse engineer, I know what you're talking about, but I want to make sure, I'm just thinking of the more than anybody, probably maybe some travel ball coaches that are beginning, or maybe maybe they're just fairly new at doing this. Reverse engineering is you're starting on opening day and you're going backwards, and you're planning. The pitcher needs to be ready for this many pitches. I need him to be able to do whatever I want him to do on day one of the season, and then I'm going to back up and then you piece in the rest, the workout, the program. I don't know about you. I prefer guys to do things twice before I advance them or move them up or bump their pitch count up. So things like that. I just want to make sure that it was clear what you meant when you say reverse engineer.
Yeah, so this is how I do it. So I'm a paper calendar person. I buy calendars, I print them out. I am a calendar person. So for example, I have a pitcher that started last week in off season. He complete off season until February. So I said, when's your first practice? Well, we don't know, but probably in February. Okay, so I pull out January 2021. I go to the last week of January, or the 31st is on a Sunday, so the 24th through the 30th, Right next to that, I put 75 to 79 pitches. I go to the previous week, 70 to 75 pitches. Previous week, 65 to 70. And they're going to be doing 2 bullpens a week. That is what you need to do, especially when you get into the higher numbers. Sometimes at the beginning, I have them do 3 if they're throwing 15, but basically think of 2 pens a week. So this is a very conservative schedule. So I'm looking at this, and so I back it all the way up. And then I'm at November 8th. I was down to 20 to 25. Okay. So I'm not even thinking about today. I'm thinking about I backed it up. So then I go, okay, well, assuming he's going to need 1 week for 60 feet flat ground. So that's the previous week. He's going to need 1 week for the 45 feet flat ground. Okay. Well, now I'm at October 18th. Okay, cool. October 18th, I count 1, 2, 3, and I count all the way backwards. Okay, that gives me 6 weeks before he has to start flat ground. And I started with January. I had no idea how it would end up. And I don't shift it unless I end up in trouble. If I go, when do you have to start? And I back it up and I go, oh, okay. So then I'm looking at where can I cut some time? Where can I do this? How can I do this? So I always start with the date that the pitcher gives me. So I'm a date person. Give me when your showcase is. So for example, if somebody says, I am in off season now, but I have a showcase in December, which some of the Pac-12 schools, I hate when they do this. This means they've got to be almost peaking in December to be seen, which means this whole next few months is going to look different. That's why I tell my pitchers, please find the schools. I have my guys do this in January. Find the schools that you want to go to that have showcases in December and see if they have one in September or October, because the sooner the showcases can throw off the entire season. But you have to deal with it. And especially now, which I think is a good time to talk about this, when they're scrambling. So, Larry, you said something to me and it didn't make sense. And then all of a sudden I said, oh, wait a minute, no outflow, therefore no inflow. Let's talk about for the graduating seniors, the 2021 seniors, what is happening?
Yeah, it's a mess. I mean, it's, the season's being canceled due to COVID, and the NCAA and junior colleges and then pretty much everybody, as far as I know, it gave everybody their year back, basically. So if they were a freshman last year, they're a COVID freshman this year, meaning they still have 4 years to play. And we also allowed, our seniors to come back at the NCAA level and not count against our roster limits. Like in Division I level, we have a roster limit of 35. Well, they relaxed the roster limit to begin with to allow the seniors to come back, and then relaxed it even more to give some teams and give some guys some relief. Basically, this year, for example, we have 5 classes on campus. I have last year's seniors class, last year's junior class, last year's sophomore class, last year's freshman class, plus this year's freshman class. And everybody is kind of in the same boat for the most part. There may be some instances where a 4-year school doesn't have grad school. And so those seniors have to move on to find a place to play. It just created, a mess. That's compounded by the transfer portal at the NCAA and Division I and Division II levels. I went back and counted the numbers from around March 13th, 15th in that area, which is when everybody in college is pretty much called off the field, generally speaking. And the 2019-2020 school year at the Division I level, there were 1,223 guys in the portal, in the transfer portal. And when you go in the transfer portal, that means once your name is in the transfer portal, all other Division I, Division II colleges, universities can contact you. So you don't need to get permission to contact. That's a blanket permission to contact. So once their name is in the portal. So at the Division I level for last school year, 1,200 people, and that's, keep in mind, everybody basically now has 5 classes on campus at the 4-year level. At the 2-year schools, 3 classes are on campus. So it's nuts. At the Division II level, there were 479 last year. And now already this year, the 2021 season, there's 78 in the Division I portal and 67 in the Division II portal as we speak today, right now. So the 21 class is the most affected by this. And so that's why you see, and I understandably so, I mean, you could say panic. I mean, guys are scrambling for places to play. Normally, because the places that they would normally go, that the class that they're going to replace isn't leaving. They're not going to be gone. So and it's going to get better each year because there are going to be players from each class that opt not to use their fifth year, basically, is what they're getting in 5 years. They get to use their fifth year. It's like getting redshirted last year, basically. So more and more, I think each year there will be fewer people using that extra year. And so there'll be a little bit of relief as we go. But this first year for the 21 class, there's just not a lot of room. There are not a lot of room for them. And so you're seeing what you're seeing is them going to showcases in December, January, because there's a market for it. There's somebody that can put on a showcase because there's a need. But it's the Division twos and threes can get out on the road. The NAIAs and the junior colleges can get out on the road, but the Division ones can't go on the road. Actually, they're voting on it today, which is when we're taping this, is a Wednesday. If I would assume that the dead period is going to be extended, but we don't know yet. I haven't heard, but it's going to be, I guess, decided or voted on today.
That's interesting because I saw a list of schools at a showcase, and some of them were D1s, and the head coaches were going to be there. And so that's interesting. So,
well, if they're dead, and then you can agree to be there.
I got you. You can't recruit.
Provided that the dead period isn't extended. If the dead period is extended, they can't be there, and they won't be there, I would imagine.
I got you. So, Larry, as a coach right now, so given the problem, so your season 2022 is already right now your 2021 season, obviously. The 2022 season, let's see, the graduating seniors of 2021 want to play for a school in 2022. That's going to be hard to do. Are you, as a coach, in your head, as you see pictures, gather information, are you, in a sense, planning for your 2023 roster? So let's say somebody came to you and just said, hey, I'd love to play for you. I'm graduating. Do coaches say, well, this next season is going to be rough, but go to a JUCO for a year and then come back here for the following season, or come on the team? And is there a red shirt that you give guys? Or, I mean, how do you, if you saw someone and you wanted them, but you had no spot, is there a way to put them on hold or give them an on hold strategy? What is the situation with that?
I think you could, but the junior colleges are in the same boat we are.
I gotcha.
In most cases, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's like you could almost say every single school is, I wouldn't say every single one. A lot of them are full, and there's just not a lot of room. You got to have somebody's got to replace somebody. They have to leave, and if they don't leave, there's no one to replace. And you can buy a little time, I guess, but you're still the same. If you're gonna ask them to maybe go somewhere for a year at a junior college, I mean, you might be in the same boat there too. So it's kind of hard. And yes, and then it depends on usually the Power 5 schools they've already dove into this year's freshman class in high school and gotten commitments. And, the further you move down the food chain, the later they'll recruit. The higher on the food chain, the Power 5s are recruiting earlier, and the mid majors aren't as early, and the Division twos aren't quite as early as that. And so, we're at our level, we're probably, we're looking at the 22 class right now. We're kind of, we've pretty much moved on to the 20 from the 21s, but it's not, there's still a spot or two that, we're not completely done, but at the same time, we can be pretty particular too, because there are so many players that seek spots. So for once, maybe, we're in somewhat of a driver's seat where we can be a little more selective too. And, some better players may fall to us where in a regular year, we may not have a chance at said player because, now there's just not a lot of room, and then it's just different. It's just different. It is what it is. It's just pretty crowded.
Is the situation the same for the D2s?
For the most part, I'd say so. Yeah. I mean, there's some guys that approach it differently. Some guys may have some space right now, and they're just holding on to a spot or two because they want to see what happens above them if some guys get let go at the break. Because there could be some guys let go at the break or may not make a club where they are right now too, which then creates more players hunting for a place to play when that happens. It's everybody's different, but in general.
So would the take-home message for a pitcher who isn't committed yet, wanted to play and thought they had capabilities at a D1 level, but they're a 2021 graduating senior, is the take-home message for them that when they're doing their exploration of all the schools, to be careful about who they say no to if somebody wants them?
Absolutely. And a kid may be resigned to the fact that he may have to play at a slightly lower level, that maybe he's capable of playing at a mid-major Division I, but may have to go play at a Division II school just because of him. And there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of the junior colleges are going to get a lot better. Some high level D2s or lower level programs, so to speak, are going to be a little bit better because some players are going to fall to them, so to speak. So players have to be prepared for that.
And so the consequence of that might have a reverberating effect on scouts, a coach like yourself who is looking for some good players, and where before you might go to X number of schools, now you might say, hey, let me look at some of these other places, junior college, because I think they got some spillover of some great players. So do you think that that's a possibility too, that an adjustment down the road will be that schools that maybe weren't given attention
Absolutely
are going to be given more attention? Well,
Absolutely.
that's great.
Absolutely. Also the transfer portal. So then we could dive into the transfer portal. Do I have a need for an older player? I need an older player in this situation. I'm going to go, or for a kid from a higher level. I'm at a high D2, and I want that maybe mid-major Division I guy that couldn't hang on where he was. He can help me as opposed to going to sign a high school kid. I might look into the transfer portal. So which again, the 21 high school class it's going to be really tough on them. It's not going to be easy.
Wow. Well, so awesome of information. And so for all you high school coaches out there, I hope that this has been informative, and good luck with the poor panicking. And I remember what high school seniors were like when they weren't committed, when it was a normal environment, especially out here where kids are committed when they're freshmen and sophomores. The senior that's not committed is going crazy in the fall, especially when he sees all his friends committed. Now with this, it's even worse. So we've got to keep our guys calm. But I think thinking through decisions is really important. And yes, you're right. Unfortunately, they may have to change their view of a school that maybe wasn't at the top of their list. So that's great information, Larry. So with all this being said, let's get to the last segment, one of my favorite segments, my Engineering the Pitcher segment. And today I want to talk about one of my recent obsessions, and it actually has to do, it started me thinking when we did the last podcast. When we did the last podcast on the grips and the spin and the way the fingers have to approach beyond the seams and the way the hand has to grip the ball, one of the things I realized is that we always talk about being behind the ball, and we always talk about getting out in front of your front leg, getting your hand closer to the plate. And we always talk about that. That's a conversation. But one of the dots that I connected after our last podcast was, if a pitcher has a style of pitching that is more vertical, or his arm is not as out in front as it should be for whatever reason, and there's a lot of reasons that can go into that part of the pitching motion, he doesn't have room, actually enough space in his arm to do the critical things that have to happen in order for that ball to roll up at exactly the right time so he can pull on the ball in exactly the way he wants. So I started thinking about the issue of location and velocity. Again, another reason why getting over the front leg, giving the arm plenty of room to do its job is how we improve the pitch. So I had 2 pitchers that I started working with on this concept. I cannot tell you the success of working with this issue. So I want to talk about getting out over the front leg. I want to give you a drill, which you've seen before. And I also want to give you a method for training this component. So in this segment, I like to talk about how do we engineer the pitching motion? How do we engineer the pitcher to actually be able to have the skill that he needs to have an effective delivery? So remember, everyone, you go to Angel Borrelli Pitching on YouTube. You can not only listen to the podcast there, but you can go to what's called the teaching moment. It'll be right next to the episode, and you can easily see the photos and the videos that we're talking about. So, Larry, I want you to open up the video I sent you called the follow-through drill.
Got it.
Okay, so this is he's actually a catcher, and I had him do this drill for me. And what I asked him to do was just get into the follow-through position. So this drill here is designed to teach the pitcher how to get over his front leg. So what I want to bring your attention to for this part of the training is to look at the front leg. So when he is doing the motion, you'll notice that as he goes over the front leg, his shoulders are actually out in front of his landing foot, and his knee is over his ankle. Now, the thing I want you to look at is I want you to look at the height of his thigh on his left leg.
Gotcha.
Now, the height of the thigh of the front leg is a very critical feature to the ability of that foot to transfer energy into the rest of the body. So when the pitcher lands, energy goes up through the foot, into the lower leg, in through the upper leg, and then into the pelvis, into the rotation, which ends up in the shoulder, passing it on through the elbow to the wrist. That's the chain of events. If the front thigh is not stabilized at an angle that's similar to this, and let's talk about this. If the leg is completely straight, like it is when you're standing, we'll call that a straight leg. If you look at him in his follow through, he's completely flexed in the hip. His leg straightened up a little more. Where you want the pitcher to land is halfway between, if he's down in a lunge, let's say, and you see his thigh completely parallel to the ground, that's too low. And pitchers that sink that low, they lose energy. The halfway mark between that, so we'll call it a 45-degree angle above the knee to a straight leg, is where a pitcher lands. And as he goes over, as you'll see Scott doing, he actually straightens his leg a little bit more as he comes over the leg. So this angle of the thigh is what I want to talk about today. The ability of the pitcher to land. Keep the angle of that thigh consistent as he turns so that he can go over the leg, and he's got the thigh consistent, and that makes the knee stay over the ankle. So the ankle and the knee have to be over each other, and the thigh has to be at a consistent angle, because if the angle doesn't stay consistent, he's not going to be able to straighten it up a little more and then get way out in front. And you can see, even though this is a drill, how far out in front his hand is. And that's determined by how far out in front his shoulder actually is, because remember, the arm is connected to the shoulder. Now, to talk about the problems here, I want you to open up the second thing I sent you.
Okay.
Now, this is a before and after still shot.
Right.
Now, this is actually active pitching, and this is the same pitcher. Now, on the left is a very common flaw we see with the upper thigh. And we see this very frequently. We see how the knee is not over the ankle on the left picture?
Right.
Okay. And his back leg is off.
Ground.
Okay, so we like the foot down. Some pitchers pull it off quickly, but what we don't want to see is the knee straightening, moving backward, means he lost his angle of his thigh, He's pulling the knee backward, which means his body weight is way behind the foot. Look where his hand is at. And the correction of this problem, this actually is him. You can actually see the ball. He released a ball. He's doing a drill, but he released a ball. See the difference in his leg with the ankle and the knee and that stabilized thigh?
His left foot,
Okay,
right? His
see how,
left leg.
yes, yeah, we're talking about how far out in front he is. Do you see the difference in how far out in front his hand is
Hmm.
on the release than the picture on the left?
Yes.
Now, Larry, the reason why pitchers have this problem is pitchers usually started hitting when they were a little kid and they were hitting more than they were pitching. And hitters straighten the front knee to keep their weight back to stabilize the hit, correct?
Right.
They weight shift and then they pull it back. That's why we see pitchers having this bad habit of pulling the knee backwards, which is it is not correct. Medically, it's not right. Physical therapists will tell you the knee has to be over the ankle. But because in baseball, when the pitcher is on 2 feet, he straightens the knee backwards because he's trying to keep his weight backwards. He doesn't move forward with the bat the way the pitcher does. So if you have a front leg that looks like you're swinging a bat, well, you're doing exactly what the hitter's doing. You're keeping your weight backward. And what do we want? We want weight going behind the ball, right?
Correct.
So this is a common flaw. And the way that I investigated this is I had each pitcher. I actually did this with one of my pitchers. I had him get on the mound and I had him put his leg down very low and I had him just release the ball over his leg. Then I asked him to raise it up and he was doing a drill. So he actually was in the position of this photo on the right. So I had him raise it up a little bit. Then I had him go over his front leg and just do the pitching motion. Then I had him raise it up more. And I said, where do you want your front leg? And the rule was that he had to have a configuration that looked like the photo on the left or on the right. We designed where he could get over his leg the best. And it was not where he was pitching at. It was much higher. So that is how I determined what is the best height for this pitcher. Normally it's around 45 degrees, but everybody's got a different body. So what you want to do is get your pitchers doing that first drill. And if you see that they're a little low, have them pick up the leg. And then with your eye, say, okay, this is where I want your leg. Now, you have them do that drill with that leg so he can build this knowledge of the skill. Then you take him into the gym. You tell your strength coach that you want him to do squats, parallel stance squats, where his feet are shoulder width apart, the same stance he would have if he were going to do a lunge. And you have them do a squat. Of course, the bar's on their shoulders. And you have them descend to the height that you want that leg at. You have them descend to that. It's not going to be far down. You have them hold it for 6 seconds, which is an isometric hold. And then you have them come to the top and you have them do 10 to 12 reps with 6-second isometric holds. Now, the reason why we do this is because isometric strength, and this is, let me say it and then I'll explain it. Isometric strength is specific to the angle at which you train that strength. So if I want him to be strong at a 45-degree angle and I train him isometrically there, he will get stronger at that angle. It will not make him stronger at a 70-degree angle. It will not make him stronger at an 80-degree angle or a 40-degree. It'll make him strong at that angle. Then you follow it up with sets where he descends to that level and comes up. He descends so he can find it and come up. It is harder to keep the leg up higher, which is required to get over the front leg. Because the lower it is, the further you're down backward. it is harder to keep the leg up because gravity is pulling you down. So when you see a pitcher land at a certain height, but he ends up pitching at a lower height, he wasn't strong enough to resist gravity. And while he was going down, less force was behind the ball. So the drill helps you determine the height, looking at it, asking the pitcher, and then reinforcing the skill with that drill with the perfect height, and then reinforcing it. Perfect off-season training with squats. My guys do this in season because they train legs all year. I cannot tell you the difference on one session, and this is a really good pitcher, so he's smart. One session, pitcher stopped sinking. He was able to find that angle, and he was on top of the ball in the way we want. He was already a great pitcher, but the catcher was blown away with every pitch, and the pitcher was so happy. So this is a little thing that you can do in the off season. You can start it now. But getting this skill of the front leg is actually critical to the things that everybody talks about, which is location, spin rate. Your hand cannot do all that it's supposed to do if your body that has the arm attached to it isn't in the right place, if you're pulling backward or if you're going downward. So this is my most recent obsession. What do you think?
To me, it just right out of the gate, you're going to be able to do things like the way I see it, or you and I see the delivery way different because you come at it from a completely different angle than I do. But it's great because you have, to me, you create more leverage. You throw the ball later, you get closer to home plate. You could potentially throw the ball harder, farther. All the words we describe when we're trying to, for me, you may physically show a guy what to do. A lot of cases, I'm trying to go about it maybe a slightly different way, but we're trying to get to the same outcome. I definitely want him to get it over his front leg. You clear it up, I think, a heck of a lot better than I could. But those are the things, like the guy on the right and the pick on the right, he's closer to home plate. He has more leverage. He's over the ball. He's going to drive the ball. He's going to throw it farther, lower, farther. It's a lot of good things that come of it, just by one little simple thing. And I think there's a lot to, the angle of that from your knee to your hip of your landing leg, it's huge. And if it's like you're sitting in a chair, like if it's parallel to the ground, you're in trouble. You're in big time trouble.
Yes. And that's what I call it. In fact, this pitcher I'm talking about was sitting in a chair. He somehow morphed into that, and I had to get him out of the chair. And also notice on that picture on the right, the back foot is down. When you're at the right height, you have control over your center of mass. When you're sinking, you've got too many body parts going. I mean, when I watch a pitcher, I watch his follow through. If he's in control when he goes over the front leg, he's in control. And pitchers that are not in control, usually their body parts, I see injuries happening. They're moving their body in a way that isn't safe, a way that if you did it in your normal life, you'd have back problems, et cetera, et cetera. So this is so consistent with, I've always talked about getting over the front leg, releasing closer, but when you really start to think about the job that the arm from the elbow to the hand has, the further out you get, the more you're able to create exactly what you're trying to do with whatever pitch type. So anyway, that's my most recent obsession. And this also fits in with today's topic of 1, needing to be your best because of the competition out there now. And also 2, you're going into off season. These are things that you can focus on when you are understanding that your time is now to improve your pitching motion. So anyway, Larry, great show today. Thank you so much for everything. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We will be back in 3 weeks. This time, I promise. And remember, you can find me at Angel Borrelli Pitching on Facebook, Angel Borrelli Pitching on YouTube. And please email me with your comments or your questions at angel@gymscience.com. So goodbye, everyone, and everyone stay safe.